when you chose someone else. The first notes of the piano drifted through the grand hall like a memory that had forgotten how to fade. Ethan Carter stopped just inside the entrance. For a heartbeat, the world continued without him. Guests laughed beneath crystal chandeliers, waiters glided between tables carrying champagne, and soft conversations blended with the music into something warm and celebratory. Then he saw her, Emma, standing at the end of the aisle in a white dress she had once jokingly described to him on a rainy afternoon years ago. "I don't want something too fancy," she'd said, twirling a sugar packet between her fingers in a tiny cafe. "Just something that makes me feel like myself." This dress did exactly that. Simple, elegant, perfect. Everything he had imagined. Everything he had dreamed he would see from the other end of the aisle. Instead, he stood among strangers while another man waited for her at the altar. Ethan forgot how to breathe. His invitation crumpled slightly in his trembling hand. "Emma Bennett and Daniel Brooks request the honor of your presence." He had read those words at least 100 times over the past 3 weeks, hoping each time that somehow the letters would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. They never did. He should have stayed home. He had promised himself he would. Yet somehow his feet had carried him here. Because loving someone sometimes meant witnessing the life they chose without you. Emma looked radiant. Not because of the dress. Not because of the flowers woven into her hair. But because she was smiling. The same smile that had once convinced Ethan that broken days could still end beautifully. The same smile that had pulled him through college exams, family funerals, impossible bills, sleepless nights, and dreams that had seemed far too large for 2 ordinary people. Now it belonged to another future. Another name. Another promise. She hadn't noticed him yet. Maybe that was better. Maybe this was how stories like theirs were supposed to end, not with dramatic speeches or impossible confessions, but with quiet acceptance. The minister began speaking. Guests rose to their feet. Ethan remained frozen. Every word blurred together until only Emma remained in focus. She took one slow step, then another. Each step felt like the closing of a door he had never truly stopped waiting to reopen. His mind betrayed him. Not with regret, with memories. Because memories were cruel that way. They always arrived uninvited. 6 years earlier, it had been raining so hard that the city seemed determined to wash itself away. Ethan had ducked into a tiny neighborhood bookstore to escape the downpour. The shop smelled of old paper, coffee, and cedar shelves. He loved places like this. Quiet places where stories waited patiently for someone to discover them. As he shook the rain from his jacket, someone rounded the corner of a bookshelf carrying an impossible stack of novels. She couldn't see where she was going. Neither could he. The collision scattered books across the wooden floor. Oh no. She knelt immediately, gathering paperbacks with frantic apologies. "I'm so sorry." "No," Ethan laughed, crouching beside her. "That was definitely my fault. You don't even know what happened. I walked into someone carrying 20 books. 19. What? There were 19 books. He looked at the pile. She was right. You counted. I work here. Only then did he notice the little name tag pinned to her cardigan. Emma. She caught him looking. You were checking whether I really worked here. I was checking your name. And it suits you. A faint blush touched her cheeks. You use that line often. Never. Liar. Terrible liar. The worst. She smiled. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't movie perfect. It was real. The kind of smile that reached her eyes before it reached her lips. The kind people carried after surviving difficult years without letting life harden them. Together they finished gathering the books. You like classics? Emma asked, noticing the novel in his hand. I pretend I understand them. She laughed. I do the same thing. That laugh lingered in Ethan's thoughts long after he left the bookstore. 3 days later, he found himself walking past the same street. Coincidentally. At least that was what he told himself. Emma looked up from arranging a display in the window. You again. I think I forgot something. Oh. My courage. She rolled her eyes. That line was only slightly better. So there's hope. For your pickup lines. For coffee. Emma folded her arms thoughtfully. I don't even know your name. Ethan. She repeated it quietly. Ethan. Somehow hearing his own name from her felt different. Like it belonged in her voice. I finish work at 6, she finally said. Is that a yes? It depends. On what? Whether you promise not to lie about understanding classic literature. I can promise honesty. She smiled again. 6 o'clock. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became evening walks. Walks became weekends together. Some relationships exploded into existence like fireworks. Theirs grew quietly, like sunrise. Neither of them noticed exactly when friendship became something impossible to live without. Emma learned that Ethan always ordered coffee before asking what she wanted because he somehow remembered her favorite before she ever had to say it. Ethan learned that Emma cried during animated movies, but never during sad dramas. She loved bookstores more than shopping malls. He preferred handwritten letters over text messages. She believed every city looked prettier after rain. He started hopping for cloudy weather just to watch her smile. Months passed almost invisibly. One chilly October evening, they found themselves sitting on the hood of Ethan's old car, overlooking the city lights. Neither spoke for several minutes. Sometimes silence was simply another language between people who understood each other. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. You know what scares me? She asked. What? That happiness can disappear without warning. Ethan turned to look at her. It can. She nodded. So how do people keep loving anyway? He thought carefully before answering. Maybe because love isn't believing nothing will change. What is it then? It's choosing someone, even when life becomes uncertain. Emma looked at him for a long moment. So, I think. Her words faded into the cool night air as she searched his face. I think I've already chosen you. Ethan's heart forgot its rhythm. The city below sparkled like 1,000 distant stars, but in that moment, he saw only the woman beside him. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with his, as though they had always belonged there. For the first time in his life, the future felt close enough to touch. Neither of them knew that sometimes love doesn't end because two people stop choosing each other. Sometimes, life quietly begins choosing for them. The weeks that followed felt like the beginning of a life neither Ethan nor Emma had planned, yet somehow had always been waiting for. Love did not arrive with dramatic declarations or impossible promises. It slipped quietly into ordinary moments, shared breakfasts before work, late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight, and long walks where neither of them cared where the road ended as long as they were together. Autumn surrendered to winter. The city became softer beneath blankets of fog, and the cafe on the corner became their favorite place to escape the cold. Every Friday evening, Ethan would arrive 10 minutes early, claiming he wanted the table by the window. Emma knew the truth. He simply liked watching for her. The little bell above the cafe door would ring. She would step inside, brushing cold air from her coat, her cheeks pink from the wind, and somehow the entire room felt warmer. You always get here first, she teased one evening as she slid into the chair across from him. I like pretending I'm patient. You've already ordered my coffee, haven't you? Ethan grinned. It should be here in about 30 seconds. Almost on cue, the waiter placed a steaming mug in front of her. Emma laughed, shaking her head. I don't know if that's romantic or slightly terrifying. I prefer thoughtful. I'll allow it. She wrapped both hands around the mug, savoring its warmth. I've never had someone remember the little things before. The little things are usually the important ones, Ethan replied. She looked at him for a long moment, her smile softening into something deeper. You always say things like that. Like what? Things that make me believe the world isn't as complicated as everyone says it is. He shrugged. Maybe it isn't. But people are. He couldn't argue with that. December arrived carrying Christmas lights, crowded streets, and the comforting scent of cinnamon drifting from every bakery in town. One snowy evening, Ethan convinced Emma to wander through the annual holiday market. She protested the cold. He insisted the hot chocolate was worth it. They walked between rows of glowing wooden stalls, their laughter rising above the music playing through hidden speakers. Emma stopped in front of a tiny booth filled with handmade ornaments. One caught her eye immediately. A small wooden heart. Simple. Unpainted. On the back, someone had carved the words, "Home is wherever love stays." She held it carefully. It's beautiful. Ethan watched her expression instead of the ornament. Buy it. I shouldn't. Why not? I don't need decorations. You smiled. So, you smile at books, flowers, dogs, sunsets, old buildings. But that smile was different. She lowered her eyes. I just liked it. Without another word, Ethan bought the ornament. When he handed it to her, she frowned. You didn't have to. I know. I can't let you keep buying me things. It's not a gift. It isn't. It's an investment. In what? In every Christmas we haven't celebrated yet. For a second, she simply stared at him. Then her eyes shimmered. She slipped the ornament into her bag, as though it were made of glass. I'll keep it forever. Neither of them knew how heavy those words would become. Months passed. Spring painted the city in blossoms and sunlight. Their relationship grew stronger with every ordinary day. They met each other's families. Emma's father loved Ethan almost immediately. Her mother was more reserved, watching him carefully before finally admitting that anyone who could make her daughter laugh that much couldn't be entirely bad. Ethan's younger sister adored Emma. She declared, after only one dinner together, that Emma was already part of the family. Emma blushed so deeply that Ethan thought she might disappear beneath the table. Later that night, walking home beneath blooming cherry trees, she nudged his shoulder. Your sister embarrassed me. She embarrassed both of us. I liked her. So did she. Emma slipped her hand into his. I've never felt this safe before. He looked down at their intertwined fingers. I hope you always do. She smiled but didn't answer. By summer, they had built a collection of traditions that belonged only to them. Sunday morning pancakes. Reading side by side in the bookstore after Emma finished work. Watching the sunrise from the hill overlooking the city. Leaving handwritten notes in unexpected places. Sometimes Ethan would hide tiny messages inside the books Emma recommended to customers. She would discover them hours later. Don't forget to eat lunch. You're beautiful when you're concentrating. Meet me on the rooftop after work. She kept every one, folded carefully inside a small wooden box beneath her bed. One afternoon, while helping her reorganize her apartment, Ethan accidentally found it. I wasn't supposed to see this, was I? Emma hurried across the room. No. I'm sorry. She hesitated before opening the box. Inside were dozens of folded notes. Movie tickets. Pressed flowers. Receipts from coffee dates. A train ticket from their first weekend trip. Even the paper napkin, on which Ethan had absent-mindedly drawn a smiling face months earlier. You kept all of this? Emma nodded. I'm afraid of forgetting. You'd never forget. I might. She looked at him with surprising seriousness. My grandmother used to say memories fade long before love does. Ethan gently closed the box. Then we'll keep making new memories. So many that you'll never run out. She rested her forehead against his chest. I like that plan. Late that August, Ethan took Emma on a drive to the coast. Neither of them had planned anything. They simply wanted to escape the noise of the city. The ocean greeted them with endless blue, salty air, and waves that rolled onto the shore with patient rhythm. They kicked off their shoes and walked barefoot across the sand. Emma spun in circles, laughing as the wind tangled her hair. You look ridiculous, Ethan called. I know. People are starring. Good. She stretched her arms toward the sky. I've never felt so alive. He watched her dance with the waves. At that moment, Ethan realized something that frightened him with its certainty. He could imagine growing old beside her. Not just next year. Not 5 years from now. Always. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea in shades of gold and crimson, he reached into his backpack. Emma noticed. What are you hiding? Nothing. You're a terrible liar. I've been told. He pulled out a small notebook instead of a ring. Her shoulders relaxed. I thought. What? She laughed nervously. Nothing. He opened the notebook. Inside were sketches. Tiny dreams. A house with a wraparound porch. A cozy reading room lined with books. A kitchen with large windows. A garden full of wildflowers. A swing hanging from an old oak tree. Emma turned each page slowly. You drew all this. Not because I know it'll happen. Then why? Because whenever I imagine my future. He looked at her. You're already in every picture. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Without saying a word, she closed the notebook and kissed him beneath the fading light. It wasn't their first kiss, but it was the first one that felt like a promise. Far away, thunder rumbled beyond the horizon. Neither of them noticed the storm that was beginning to gather, not over the sea, but over the life they had so carefully built. The storm arrived quietly. Not with thunder. Not with shouting. Not with a heartbreaking goodbye. It arrived in the form of an email. Ethan stared at the glowing screen in his office, reading the same sentence over and over again. Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you the position of Senior Architectural Designer in Seattle. 6 months. A promotion. A salary almost twice what he earned now. The kind of opportunity people waited their entire careers for. His coworkers congratulated him before he had even finished reading the message. His manager shook his hand. You've earned this, Ethan. He smiled politely. But his thoughts weren't in Seattle. They were in a little bookstore on Maple Street, where Emma would be rearranging shelves and recommending novels to strangers with that gentle smile he loved. That evening, he found her sitting on the bookstore floor, surrounded by stacks of new arrivals. She looked up as he walked in. There you are. Her smile faded almost immediately. You look worried. Ethan sat beside her. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, he handed her his phone. She read the email silently. When she reached the end, she looked back at him. They chose you. I know. This is amazing. I know. You don't sound happy. I'm not sure I am. Emma placed the phone between them. What are you afraid of? You. She blinked. Me. I'm afraid of losing you. A soft sadness crossed her face. She reached for his hand. You won't. It's on the other side of the country. It's only a plane ride away. It isn't the distance that scares me. What then? The time. Emma understood before he finished speaking. Different schedules. Different cities. Different lives. The tiny spaces where love could slowly disappear. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You should go. He looked at her in disbelief. That's your answer. I love you too much to become the reason you give up your dream. My dream was never a city. She smiled sadly. It was before you met me. The following weeks passed like pages turning too quickly. Every day felt more precious because they knew it was slipping away. They visited all of their favorite places. The bookstore, the cafe by the river, the hill overlooking the city, the beach where Ethan had shown her his notebook filled with dreams. Everywhere they went, they left behind invisible pieces of themselves. One evening, they sat on the rooftop of Ethan's apartment building, watching airplanes cross the night sky. Emma pointed upward. Maybe one of those is yours. I don't want it to be. She laughed softly. You always were stubborn. And you're always pretending to be stronger than you feel. Her smile disappeared. He was right. She was terrified. Not because she doubted Ethan. Because she doubted life. Life had a way of changing people without asking permission. What if, she whispered. What? What if we become strangers? Ethan turned toward her. Look at me. She did. I could forget every street in the city. She nodded. I could forget every password I've ever made. She smiled faintly. I could even forget where I left my car keys. She laughed through her tears. But I'll never forget you. She believed him. At least. She wanted to. The morning Ethan left, the train station was unusually quiet. Emma stood beside him, her hands buried inside the pockets of her coat to stop them from shaking. Announcements echoed overhead. Passengers hurried past. The world continued moving, as though two hearts weren't breaking in the middle of platform 7. I hate goodbyes, Emma whispered. This isn't goodbye. What is it then? It's... He searched for the right word. Later. She nodded. Later. The train whistle echoed through the station. Final boarding. Ethan wrapped his arms around her. She held him as tightly as she could, as though love alone might stop the train from leaving. I'll call every night. I know. I'll visit every month. I know. I'll come back. I know. When he finally stepped onto the train, Emma remained on the platform, smiling through tears. She refused to let him see her cry. The train began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. Ethan stood by the window until she disappeared from view. Only then did he allow himself to break. The first few weeks weren't as difficult as they had feared. Video calls every evening. Good morning messages. Photos of ordinary moments. Emma sent pictures of books she thought he'd love. Ethan sent photos of buildings under construction. Sometimes they fell asleep while talking on video, neither wanting to be the first to say goodnight. Distance felt manageable. Temporary. Almost harmless. Then work became busier. Deadlines stretched into weekends. Meetings replaced phone calls. Time zones became excuses. I'm sorry, Ethan said one night. I have to stay late again. It's okay. I'll call tomorrow. You said that yesterday. Silence. I know. I miss you. I miss you too. Emma stopped herself. What? I don't want us to become people who only say they miss each other. He closed his eyes. Neither did he. 3 months later, Ethan booked a surprise flight home. He imagined Emma's face when she saw him. He rehearsed the moment during the entire flight. Instead, When he reached the bookstore, the lights were off. A handwritten sign hung on the door. "Closed today." He frowned. Emma never closed the store unexpectedly. Concern tightened in his chest. He called her. No answer. Again. Voicemail. His heart began to race. Just as he was about to call her mother, his phone rang. "Emma. Ethan. Where are you?" "At the hospital." Everything inside him froze. "What happened?" "It's my dad." The words barely reached him. "He collapsed this morning." Without another question, Ethan ran. When he reached the hospital, he found Emma sitting alone outside the intensive care unit. Her eyes were swollen. She looked exhausted. The moment she saw him, all the strength she'd been pretending to have disappeared. She stood, crossed the hallway, and collapsed into his arms. "I didn't know who else to call. You never have to face this alone." For the next 2 days, Ethan barely left the hospital. He brought her coffee, made sure she ate, held her hand through long hours of waiting. Eventually, her father's condition stabilized. The doctors were hopeful. Relief washed over them both. But the unexpected trip cost Ethan dearly. Back in Seattle, his absence had delayed a major project. His manager wasn't pleased. "You need to decide where your priorities are," he said. Ethan didn't answer. Because he already knew. His priority had never been the job. The problem was, love didn't pay hospital bills. Dreams didn't cover mortgages. And life had begun asking questions neither of them knew how to answer. As autumn returned once more, tiny cracks, almost invisible at first, began to spread through the beautiful future they had imagined together. Neither Ethan nor Emma realized that sometimes a relationship doesn't fall apart all at once. Sometimes, it breaks one unanswered call, one postponed visit, and one unspoken fear at a time. Some heartbreaks arrive with slammed doors. Others arrive with silence. At first, Ethan and Emma believed silence was harmless. After all, they had survived months apart. A missed call here, a postponed visit there, those were just small inconveniences, they told themselves. But silence had a strange way of growing. It filled the spaces where laughter used to live. It settled into conversations that once lasted for hours. It turned, "I can't talk right now," into "maybe tomorrow." Then maybe tomorrow quietly became, "We'll talk this weekend." And sometimes, the weekend never came. Emma's father returned home after several weeks in the hospital, but he was no longer the energetic man who had spent weekends fixing things around the house or teasing Ethan about marrying his daughter. His heart had become fragile. So had the family's finances. Medical bills piled up on the kitchen table. Emma took extra shifts at the bookstore and began tutoring children in the evenings just to help with expenses. She never complained. Whenever Ethan called, she smiled. "Everything's fine." He wanted to believe her, but he knew that smile. It was the same smile she wore whenever she was carrying pain she didn't want anyone else to feel. Seattle wasn't becoming easier either. Ethan's promotion came with expectations he had underestimated. His office lights were often the last ones glowing in the building. Some nights, he didn't leave until after midnight. His apartment slowly stopped feeling like a home. The plants Emma had insisted he buy were beginning to wilt. The framed photograph of them at the beach gathered dust on his desk. Every evening he promised himself he would call her after finishing one more drawing. Then another meeting would begin. Another deadline would appear. By the time he looked at the clock, it was already past midnight. Emma would be asleep. He'd type a quick message. "I'm sorry, long day, I'll call tomorrow, I love you." She always replied. Sometimes immediately. Sometimes hours later. "I love you too." 3 simple words. Yet with every passing week, they seemed to carry more distance. One rainy Saturday, Ethan finally managed to fly home. He hadn't told Emma. He wanted to surprise her. As he walked toward the bookstore, memories flooded back. The little bell above the door. The smell of old pages and fresh coffee. The corner where they had first bumped into each other. He smiled despite himself. Pushing open the door, he waited for the familiar sound of her voice. Instead, he heard laughter. Emma stood near the front counter, smiling warmly as she spoke with a man about her age. The stranger handed her a stack of books. She laughed at something he said. For a moment, Ethan simply watched. Not because he doubted her, because he suddenly realized how much of her life now existed without him. The stranger noticed Ethan first. "Oh," he said politely, "customer." Emma turned. Her eyes widened. "Ethan." She hurried across the room and threw her arms around him. "You came. I wanted to surprise you." "You definitely did." She stepped back, still smiling. "Oh, Ethan, this is Ryan. He volunteers at the community library. We've been organizing a reading program for kids." Ryan extended his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Ethan shook it. "Likewise." Everything was perfectly innocent. Ryan left a few minutes later. Emma locked the bookstore and looked at Ethan. "What?" "Nothing." "No." She tilted her head. "I know that face." "What face?" "The one where you're pretending everything is okay." He looked away. "I just realized." "What?" "I've missed so much." Emma reached for his hand. "You haven't missed me." "No." "But I've missed your life." She squeezed his fingers gently. "You are my life." He smiled, but something inside him had shifted. Not jealousy. Fear. Fear that time was quietly teaching them how to live without each other. That evening, they walked along the river where they had shared countless sunsets. The city lights shimmered on the water. Everything looked exactly the same. Only they had changed. Emma stopped beside the old wooden bridge. "Remember the first time we came here? You dropped your ice cream. You laughed. You looked adorable. I looked ridiculous. You always look beautiful." She smiled faintly. "You used to say things like that all the time." "I still think them." "I know. But you don't say them anymore." The words hung between them. Heavy. Honest. Painful. Ethan lowered his eyes. "I'm trying so hard, Emma." "I know you are." "I don't know how to do all of this." "Neither do I." For the first time since they had fallen in love, neither of them knew how to fix what was breaking. Winter arrived earlier than expected. Snow covered the city. Christmas lights returned. Exactly 1 year earlier, Ethan had bought Emma the little wooden heart that read, "Home is wherever love stays." It still hung beside her bedroom window. She touched it every morning before leaving for work, as if it were a promise. As if promises could keep people together. 3 days before Christmas, Ethan called. His voice sounded exhausted. "I'm sorry." Emma smiled, even though he couldn't see her. "For what?" "I can't come home." She closed her eyes. "Oh." "The project deadline moved." "I understand. I'll come in January." "It's okay." "I mean it." "I know." Neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan whispered, "I wish I were there." "So do I." When the call ended, Emma remained sitting beside the Christmas tree long after midnight. For the first time in years, she cried alone. On Christmas morning, Ethan woke to dozens of messages from family and friends. There was one from Emma. Just a photograph. The little wooden ornament hanging beside the window. Beneath it, she had written, "Home is wherever love stays." Ethan stared at the picture for several minutes. Then he noticed something else. The ornament had cracked down the middle. A tiny fracture. Barely visible, but impossible to ignore. He almost called her. Instead, another work meeting began. He told himself he'd call afterward. He never did. January brought more snow, more deadlines, more hospital appointments for Emma's father, more overtime, more missed conversations. Love was still there, but it was becoming buried beneath responsibilities neither of them had chosen. One cold evening, Emma stood outside the bookstore waiting for Ethan's call. 7 o'clock. Nothing. 8 o'clock. Nothing. 9 o'clock. Still nothing. Finally, at 10:30, her phone buzzed. A single message. "Sorry, fell asleep at my desk." She typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, she wrote only 3 words. "Sleep well, Ethan." She didn't mention that she had spent 4 hours waiting. She didn't mention that it had been their anniversary. She didn't mention the untouched dinner she'd cooked for 2. Some disappointments hurt too much to explain. Hundreds of miles away, Ethan stared at her message with a heavy heart. He looked at the calendar on his computer. January 18. Their anniversary. His chest tightened. He had forgotten. For the first time since meeting Emma. He had forgotten. He reached for his phone to call her immediately. Then he noticed the time. Almost midnight. He imagined her already asleep. "I'll call first thing tomorrow," he whispered. But somewhere deep inside, he feared that an apology, no matter how sincere, could never return a moment that had already been lost. Outside his apartment window, snow continued to fall in perfect silence. And neither Ethan nor Emma realized that sometimes love doesn't end with one devastating mistake. Sometimes, it slowly disappears beneath 1,000 small ones, until one day, the silence between 2 hearts becomes louder than all the words they never found the time to say. February arrived carrying cold winds and empty promises. The city looked exactly as it always had: crowded sidewalks, glowing traffic lights, cafes filled with strangers escaping the winter air. Yet to Emma, everything felt unfamiliar. Not because the city had changed, because she had. Every morning, she unlocked the bookstore at 8 o'clock. She arranged new releases on the front table, dusted the shelves, brewed a fresh pot of coffee for customers, and greeted everyone with the same gentle smile they had come to expect. "Good morning. Can I help you find something? I think you'll love this novel." She smiled so naturally that no one noticed how tired her eyes had become. No one knew she hadn't slept properly in weeks. No one knew she still checked her phone every hour, hoping to see Ethan's name appear on the screen. He still called, just not the way he used to. Their conversations had become careful, almost rehearsed. "How's work?" "Busy." "How's your dad?" "Better." "I miss you." "I miss you too." Then silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Just empty. As though both of them had 1,000 things to say, but couldn't remember where to begin. 3,000 miles away, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring at the small wooden heart hanging beside his desk. Home is wherever love stays. He remembered buying it at the Christmas market. He remembered the way Emma's face had lit up. Back then, the future had seemed simple. Now every plan felt uncertain. His promotion had become permanent. His company wanted him to lead a new project that would keep him in Seattle for at least another 2 years. It was everything he had worked for. Everything he had dreamed about. So why did it feel like he was losing something far more valuable? One Friday evening, Ethan's manager, Olivia, stopped by his office. "You should come out with the team tonight," she said. "You've practically been living here." "I'm not really in the mood." Exactly why you should come." He forced a smile. "I'll think about it." After she left, Ethan glanced at the photograph on his desk. It showed him and Emma standing barefoot on the beach, laughing as a wave splashed over their feet. He picked up the frame. "When did we stop laughing?" he whispered. The office around him was silent. There was no answer. That same evening, Emma closed the bookstore early. Her father had another doctor's appointment the next morning, and she wanted to prepare dinner before he came home. As she reached into her mailbox, she noticed a cream-colored envelope. There was no return address. Her name was written neatly across the front. She carried it upstairs, curious. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Emma, I know we've never met properly, but I feel like I already know you. Ethan talks about you every chance he gets." She paused. The letter was signed by Ethan's younger sister, Lily. Emma smiled as she continued reading. Lily wrote about family dinners, where Ethan always found a way to mention Emma. About how he still refused to decorate his apartment because Emma has better taste. About the beach photo he carried in his wallet. About how he still wore the watch Emma had given him on his birthday. Then came one sentence that made Emma's eyes fill with tears. "My brother looks successful these days, but he doesn't look happy. I think part of him is still waiting for the life he imagined with you." Emma folded the letter carefully. For the first time in months, hope stirred quietly inside her. Maybe they weren't as far apart as they felt. Maybe all they needed was time together. Maybe. She picked up her phone and booked a flight to Seattle. She wanted to surprise him, just as he had surprised her before. 3 days later, Emma stood inside the airport terminal, her heart racing. She hadn't told Ethan she was coming. She imagined his expression when he saw her. She imagined them laughing about how foolish they had been to let work and distance become walls between them. She imagined holding his hand again. The taxi stopped outside the glass office building where Ethan worked. Emma took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered. The receptionist smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Ethan Carter." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, it's a surprise." The receptionist's smile widened. "That's sweet. Let me check if he's available." Emma waited. She straightened her coat, suddenly nervous. A minute later, the receptionist returned. "I'm sorry, he's in a meeting." "That's okay, I'll wait." She sat in the lobby, watching people come and go. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, the elevator doors opened. Employees began leaving the conference room. Emma stood. Her heart pounded. Then she saw him. Ethan. He looked more tired than she remembered. His shoulders were tense. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. For a moment, all she wanted to do was run into his arms. But before she could move, a woman walked beside him. She handed him a folder, laughing at something he had said. Ethan laughed too. It was a small laugh. A polite one. Still, Emma froze. Not because she thought he had betrayed her. Because she suddenly realized that his life had continued to grow in places where she no longer existed. The receptionist called out gently, "Mr. Carter, someone's here to see you." Ethan looked up. Time seemed to stop. "Emma." Shock flooded his face. Then joy. Pure, unmistakable joy. He crossed the lobby in long strides until he stood in front of her. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to surprise you." For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan wrapped his arms around her so tightly that she could barely breathe. "I've missed you," he whispered. "I've missed you too." Behind them, the city carried on as usual. Cars moved through the streets. People hurried toward the train station. Snow drifted gently from the gray sky. Neither of them knew that this unexpected reunion would force them to confront every unspoken fear, every hidden sacrifice, and every choice that had brought them to this moment. Because sometimes, love doesn't need a grand gesture to find its way back. Sometimes, it begins with two people finally showing up before it's too late. For a long moment, neither of them let go. The lobby around them buzzed with quiet conversations, ringing phones, and the soft hum of elevators, but Ethan heard none of it. All he could feel was Emma's heartbeat against his chest. When they finally stepped apart, he searched her face as if afraid she might disappear again. "I can't believe you're here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma smiled, though there was sadness behind it. "I almost turned around at the airport." "Why?" "I wasn't sure if I'd still fit into your life." A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "You never stopped fitting." He glanced toward the woman who had walked out of the meeting with him. "Oh, before you start imagining things, that was Olivia. She's my project manager." Emma gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I wasn't imagining anything." He tilted his head with a gentle smile. "You've never been good at hiding what you're feeling. And you've always been too good at reading me." For the first time in months, they laughed together. It was brief, but it felt like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Ethan left work early. As they walked through downtown Seattle, neither of them rushed to fill the silence. The streets were lined with cafes and glowing shop windows, and a light drizzle painted the sidewalks silver. "I found a little bookstore a few blocks from here," Ethan said. Emma raised an eyebrow. "You found a bookstore before you found friends." "I had priorities." She nudged his shoulder. "Some things never change." "No," he said softly, "some things don't." They stopped at a small cafe overlooking the waterfront. It wasn't their cafe back home. The coffee tasted different. The chairs were different. Even the music was different. But sitting across from each other felt strangely familiar. For a while, they talked about ordinary things. Her father's health had improved. The bookstore had started a weekend reading club for children. Ethan had completed 2 major projects. He had been promoted again. "You did it," Emma said proudly. "You always believed I could." "I still do." He looked down at his coffee. "I wish success felt the way I imagined it would." She frowned. "What does it feel like?" "Lonely." The conversation slowed. The easy smiles faded. Both of them knew they hadn't traveled thousands of miles just to exchange updates. Emma folded her hands together. "Ethan, are we pretending everything is okay?" He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he sighed. "No." She looked out the window. "I've been angry. I know. I've been hurt. I know. And sometimes..." Her voice cracked. "I wondered if you were slowly letting me go, because it was easier than saying goodbye." Ethan's eyes widened. "What?" "You stopped calling." "I know. You forgot our anniversary." His shoulders fell. "I know. I waited for hours that night. I'm sorry. I don't need another apology." "I know." Tears gathered in Emma's eyes. "I need to understand." Ethan leaned forward. "I never stopped loving you. I never said you did." "Then what happened?" She looked at him for a long time before answering. "I think we kept protecting each other from our problems." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "When Dad got sick, I told you I was fine." "You weren't. When work overwhelmed you, you told me everything was under control." "It wasn't." She nodded. "We kept hiding our hardest days because we didn't want to become another burden. And instead," Ethan whispered, "we carried them alone." Emma reached across the table. This time, he took her hand without hesitation. As evening settled over the city, they walked toward the waterfront. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and fresh. Boats rocked gently in the harbor. The sky glowed with streaks of orange and violet. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said. Emma looked at him. "My company offered me a permanent leadership role." Her smile faded slightly. "I guessed. I haven't accepted it." "You haven't?" He shook his head. "Because every time I tried to sign the papers, I kept asking myself one question." "What question?" "If this costs me the life I wanted with you, is it really success?" Emma stood silently beside him. Then she spoke with calm honesty. "I don't want you to give up your dream for me. And I don't want to keep choosing a dream that leaves me without you." The words hung between them. Neither of them had an easy answer. Love had never been the problem. Life had been. Emma slipped her hand into his. "We've spent so much time trying not to hurt each other that we forgot to be honest," Ethan finished. She nodded. For the first time in a very long while, they weren't making promises about forever. They weren't pretending everything would magically work out. They were simply standing together, telling each other the truth. And somehow, that felt like the strongest beginning they had shared in months. As the city lights reflected across the water, Ethan looked at Emma and quietly said, "Whatever happens next, let's promise each other one thing." She smiled. "No more silence." He squeezed her hand. "No more silence." The promise they made that night seemed simple. No more silence. Yet both Ethan and Emma knew that promises were only meaningful when tested by reality. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains of Ethan's apartment for the first time in days. Emma stood by the kitchen window, watching the city wake beneath a pale blue sky. "This place suits you," she said. Ethan smiled as he poured coffee into 2 mugs. "It doesn't feel like home." She turned toward him. "No." He shook his head. "It's just where I sleep." Emma accepted the mug from his hands. For years, she had imagined what Ethan's apartment would look like. She had pictured photographs on the walls, books stacked on every table, and little reminders of the life they had dreamed about. Instead, it felt temporary, functional, almost empty. The only thing that looked lived in was the small bookshelf in the corner. She walked over to it. There, resting on the top shelf, was the worn copy of Pride and Prejudice she had given him on his birthday years earlier. Inside the cover, she had written, "No matter where life takes us, I hope you always find your way back to the people who love you." Ethan noticed her reading it. "I've carried that book everywhere." Emma closed it gently. "I thought you might have forgotten." "I forgot dates," he admitted quietly. "But I never forgot us." Later that afternoon, Ethan invited Emma to visit the architectural firm where he worked. She watched him greet coworkers with confidence and professionalism. He belonged there. People respected him. They admired his talent. Olivia smiled warmly when she met Emma. "So you're the famous Emma." Emma laughed. "Famous? Ethan talks about you more than he talks about architecture." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. Olivia grinned. "I've never seen him leave work early unless it had something to do with you." Emma glanced at Ethan. "So you weren't avoiding me?" He looked down. "I was drowning." That evening, they returned to the waterfront. The ferries drifted slowly across the bay as the sun disappeared behind distant mountains. Ethan took a deep breath. "I have another confession." Emma looked at him patiently. "I almost came back 6 months ago." Her eyebrows lifted. "What stopped you?" "My boss." She frowned. "He said if I left the project halfway through, I'd probably never get another opportunity like it. And I believed him." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "You were afraid." "I was." He looked out over the water. "I kept telling myself it was only temporary. But temporary became normal." "Yes." Emma stepped closer. "I was afraid too. He turned toward her. Of what? That if I asked you to come home, one day you'd resent me. He stared at her. You thought I'd blame you. I didn't know. She smiled sadly. I've seen people give up their dreams for love. And they spent the rest of their lives wondering who they could have become. Ethan reached for her hands. I never wanted a career instead of you. And I never wanted you to choose between us. For the first time, they both understood the same painful truth. Neither of them had chosen work over love. They had chosen to protect the other. And in doing so, they had nearly lost each other. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the living room, replaying every missed call, every forgotten anniversary, every postponed visit. Around 3 a.m, he opened his laptop. The unsigned employment agreement was still waiting. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Then he closed it. The answer wasn't as simple as resigning, nor was it as simple as staying. He needed a future that made room for both the career he loved and the woman he loved. For the first time in months, he stopped thinking about what he might lose. Instead, he began thinking about what they could build together. The next morning, Ethan and Emma sat in a quiet park overlooking the city. The spring air carried the scent of blooming flowers. Children laughed nearby. An elderly couple walked hand in hand along the path. Emma smiled as she watched them. I wonder how many storms they've survived. Ethan followed her gaze. Probably more than we can imagine. She leaned against his shoulder. I don't want a perfect love story. No. She shook her head. I want a real one. He wrapped an arm around her. Real stories have difficult chapters. They also have people who keep turning the page. He looked at her with the same expression she had fallen in love with years ago. Full of hope. Full of quiet determination. I think we've been reading the same chapter for too long. Emma smiled. So let's write the next one. Before Emma's flight home that evening, they stood together at the airport terminal. This goodbye felt different. There were tears, but there was also certainty. Not certainty about the future. Certainty about each other. Ethan took both of her hands. When you get home. Yes. I'm coming with a plan. What kind of plan? A real one. No more hopping things somehow work themselves out. She nodded. We decide together. Together. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Emma stepped forward and kissed him gently. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. As she walked toward the gate, she turned one last time. Ethan was still there. Watching. Smiling. Waiting. For the first time in a long while, the distance between them no longer felt like the end of their story. It felt like the final obstacle before they discovered whether love alone was enough, or whether two people willing to fight for the same future could finally become the home they had always been searching for. The flight home was quieter than any Emma had taken before. She rested her forehead against the airplane window as the clouds drifted beneath her. For the first time in months, she wasn't wondering whether Ethan still loved her. She knew he did. The question was no longer, do we love each other? It was, can we build a life where love has room to breathe? Those were very different questions. When Emma landed, she found her father waiting outside the terminal. He smiled the moment he saw her. How was Seattle? She slipped into the passenger seat of his old car and looked out the window. It was honest. Her father chuckled. Honest conversations usually leave people exhausted. They do. He drove for several minutes before speaking again. Do you still love him? Emma didn't hesitate. Every day. And does he still love you? She smiled faintly. Yes. Her father nodded, as if he had expected that answer all along. Then don't waste another year pretending love can survive on hope alone. Emma looked at him. What do you mean? When your mother and I got married, we thought love would solve everything. He laughed softly. It didn't. It didn't. No. What kept you together? He glanced at her before returning his eyes to the road. We learned that love isn't just a feeling. It's a decision. It's a conversation. It's showing up. It's choosing each other again, especially on the difficult days. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. She realized they had spent so much time protecting each other that they had forgotten to truly fight with each other for the same future. Meanwhile, Ethan requested a meeting with the firm's senior partners. He barely slept the night before. The conference room overlooked the Seattle skyline. His manager, Olivia, sat across from him. So, she said, smiling, have you made your decision? I have. The room grew quiet. I want to stay with the company. Olivia smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. But, her smile faded. I can't stay under the current arrangement. One of the partners leaned forward. What are you proposing? Ethan took a slow breath. I'd like to lead projects remotely for part of each month. Another partner frowned. That's unconventional. I know. But most of our clients already work across different cities. Olivia folded her arms thoughtfully. This is about Emma. Ethan nodded. Yes. No one spoke for a moment. Finally, Olivia smiled. You know what? What? I've spent 2 years watching you become one of the best architects in this company. She paused. But I've also watched you slowly stop smiling. The room fell silent. We hired you because you build beautiful places, she continued. It would be a shame if building them cost you the life you actually wanted. After nearly an hour of discussion, the partners reached a compromise. The arrangement would be experimental. Half the month in Seattle, half working remotely from home. If it succeeded, it could become permanent. Ethan walked out of the meeting feeling lighter than he had in years. Not because every problem had been solved. Because, for the first time, he had asked for the life he wanted instead of silently accepting the one placed in front of him. A week later, Emma was closing the bookstore when the familiar bell above the door rang. She looked up without thinking. Ethan. He stood in the doorway with a travel bag slung over one shoulder and that crooked smile she had missed so much. I told you I'd come back with a plan. She hurried toward him. What are you doing here? I have 3 days before I need to return to Seattle. She laughed. Only 3. For now. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded several printed pages. My new work schedule. Emma stared at the papers, then back at him. You did this. I asked. They agreed. They did. She blinked away tears. You actually asked. I should have done it a year ago. Emma threw her arms around him. No. He looked confused. No. You did it when you were finally ready to stop carrying everything by yourself. He smiled. I had a good teacher. Over the next 3 days, they didn't try to make up for lost time with grand adventures. Instead, they returned to the ordinary places that had first brought them together. They visited the bookstore where they had met, the little cafe with the window table, the hill overlooking the city, the beach where Ethan had shown her the notebook full of dreams. Everything looked familiar. Yet somehow, they noticed things they had missed before. The sound of waves, the warmth of the afternoon sun, the comfort of walking side by side without checking the time. Love, they realized, had never needed extravagant moments. It had always lived in the ordinary ones. On their final evening before Ethan's return flight, they sat on the hood of his old car beneath a sky full of stars. Emma broke the silence first. What if this doesn't work? Ethan looked at her. Then we'll adjust. What if it's harder than we think? It probably will be. What if we fail? He smiled gently. Then we'll fail together. She laughed through her tears. You make everything sound so simple. No. He shook his head. I just finally understand something. What? Love isn't choosing each other once. He intertwined his fingers with hers. It's choosing each other over and over again. Emma rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, neither of them feared tomorrow. Not because the future was certain, but because they had finally learned that the strongest relationships weren't built by perfect people. They were built by imperfect people who stopped running from difficult conversations and started building a future together, one honest choice at a time. Far above them, a shooting star crossed the night sky. Emma smiled. What did you wish for? Ethan looked at her with quiet certainty. I didn't. Why not? Because everything I've been wishing for. He squeezed her hand. Is already sitting beside me. For almost a year, their plan worked. Not perfectly, but honestly. Ethan spent 2 weeks each month in Seattle and 2 weeks back home. The airport became a familiar place. Their calendars were full of flight numbers, project deadlines, doctor's appointments, and bookstore events. Some days were exhausting. Some weekends disappeared into work. But they no longer allowed silence to grow between them. If one of them felt afraid, they said it. If one of them felt overwhelmed, they admitted it. If they argued, they stayed long enough to resolve it. Their love was no longer built on perfect moments. It was built on choosing each other, again and again. One warm afternoon, Ethan stood in the backyard of Emma's parents' house, repairing the old wooden swing he had sketched years ago in his notebook. Emma watched from the porch, smiling. You still remember that drawing? I remember every page. You actually built it. I told you one day we would. She walked toward him, running her fingers across the smooth wooden seat. You know. What? This feels more romantic than expensive gifts. Ethan laughed. I've never been very good at expensive gifts. No. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. But you've always been good at keeping promises. Before Ethan could answer, Emma's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her smile faded. It's Ryan. The librarian. She nodded. I haven't spoken to him in months. She answered. A few moments later, her expression changed completely. I'm so sorry. Ethan watched quietly. When the call ended, Emma lowered the phone. What happened? Daniel. The volunteer from the reading program. She nodded slowly. He passed away last night. Ethan was stunned. Daniel had been only a few years older than them. What happened? Car accident. Silence settled between them. Life, once again, had reminded them how fragile tomorrow could be. A week later, Emma attended the memorial service. As friends shared stories about Daniel's kindness and generosity, one sentence stayed with her. Don't wait to tell people you love them. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. She held Ethan's hand a little tighter on the drive home. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Months passed. Spring turned into summer. One evening, Ethan returned from Seattle carrying a small velvet box in his jacket pocket. He had carried it for 3 weeks. Every day he planned to ask. Every day he changed his mind. He wanted the moment to be perfect. Emma found him sitting alone on the beach just before sunset. You disappeared. I needed to think. She sat beside him. Dangerous hobby. He smiled. It is. The waves rolled quietly onto the shore. Emma noticed how nervous he looked. What is it? Ethan reached into his pocket. His hands trembled. I've spent years trying to build buildings that last. He looked at her. but the only thing I've ever wanted to build forever. He opened the box. Is a life with you. Inside rested a simple ring. Nothing extravagant, just elegant. Just like the dress Emma had once described in a little cafe years ago. Tears filled her eyes before he even asked. Emma Bennett. His voice shook. Will you marry me? She laughed through her tears. You really thought I needed time to think. So, she threw her arms around him. Yes. The word escaped between happy tears. Yes. Again. Yes. The ocean carried the sound away as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. For the first time in years, their future no longer felt like a dream. It felt real. 6 months later, invitations were spread across the dining room table. Emma carefully checked each envelope while Ethan sealed them. She smiled as she read one aloud. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. He looked up. You've been practicing. I like the sound of it. So do I. She reached for another envelope, then stopped. What? I almost forgot someone. Who? Emma picked up a blank invitation. She looked at it thoughtfully before writing a name. Ethan watched her handwriting appear across the front. He smiled. Daniel's parents. She nodded. He was supposed to be here. Ethan gently covered her hand with his. He will be. She looked at him. In every story people tell about him. Emma smiled sadly. Sometimes love stories ended too soon. Sometimes life chose differently. Their own story had almost become one of those. On the evening before their wedding, Ethan found the old wooden heart hanging beside the bedroom window. Home is wherever love stays. The crack that had once split it down the middle was still there. But Emma had carefully repaired it with a thin line of gold lacquer. He held it in his hands. You fixed it. Emma smiled. No. She stepped beside him. I stopped trying to hide the crack. He looked at the golden line, catching the evening light. It became part of its story. She nodded. Just like us. Ethan wrapped an arm around her. Their relationship wasn't perfect. It never had been. It carried scars. Missed anniversaries. Long-distance tears. Hard conversations. Moments of doubt. But none of those things had destroyed their love. If anything, they had taught them how to love more honestly. The cracked wooden heart swayed gently in the breeze from the open window. It was no longer broken. It was repaired. And somehow, it was more beautiful than before. Morning arrived wrapped in golden sunlight. The same kind of sunlight that had streamed through the windows of the little bookstore years ago, when two strangers collided between shelves filled with forgotten stories. Emma stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the simple white dress she had dreamed about long before she ever knew how complicated love could become. It wasn't the most expensive dress. It wasn't covered in crystals or lace. It was simply her. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Her father stepped inside. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. His eyes glistened as he looked at his daughter. You look just like your mother did. Emma smiled through tears. You always say that. Because it's true. He offered his arm. Ready. She took a deep breath. I've been ready since the day he walked into my bookstore. Across town, Ethan stood nervously beneath an archway covered in white roses and wildflowers. His best friend nudged him. You've designed skyscrapers. Ethan nodded. You've presented projects worth millions. I know. So why are your hands shaking? Ethan laughed softly. Because none of those things mattered as much as this. Music began to play. Every guest stood. Ethan lifted his eyes. And there she was. Emma, walking toward him with the same gentle smile that had changed his life years ago. In that instant, every sleepless night, every airport goodbye, every misunderstanding, every tear, every difficult conversation, they all faded into the background. All he could see was the woman who had taught him that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth choosing every single day. When Emma reached him, Ethan whispered, "Hi." She laughed quietly. "That's all you have?" "I had a whole speech." "What happened to it?" "You smiled. And I forgot every word." She squeezed his hand. "Good." The ceremony was simple. There were no extravagant decorations, no grand performances, only family, friends, and the quiet certainty that two people who had once nearly lost each other had finally found their way home. When it came time to exchange vows, Ethan unfolded a piece of paper from his pocket. Emma raised an eyebrow. "You wrote it down." "I didn't trust my memory." The guests laughed softly. Ethan looked into her eyes. "When we first met, I thought I had found someone who loved books as much as I did." A smile spread across Emma's face. "But over the years, I realized something." He paused. "You never became the best chapter of my life. You became the reason I wanted to keep writing it." Emma wiped away a tear. "I can't promise there won't be difficult days. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. I can't promise life won't surprise us again. But I can promise this. No matter how busy the world becomes, no matter how loud life gets, I will never let silence replace the truth between us again." Emma's tears fell freely. When it was her turn, she didn't unfold a piece of paper. She simply spoke from her heart. "Ethan, there was a time when I thought loving someone meant protecting them from every burden. I was wrong." She smiled gently. "Love isn't carrying pain alone. It's trusting someone enough to carry it with you." She took both of his hands. "You once told me that home is wherever love stays. I finally understand." She looked around at everyone gathered there before returning her gaze to him. "Home isn't a place. It isn't a city. It isn't even this beautiful moment. Home," she squeezed his hands, "is the person who keeps choosing to walk beside you after seeing every version of who you are." The officiant smiled warmly. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Applause erupted. Ethan kissed Emma beneath a shower of flower petals, not as the ending of a love story, but as the beginning of a marriage built on honesty. The reception overflowed with laughter. Emma danced with her father. Ethan's sister, Lily, teased him mercilessly during her speech. Olivia had flown in from Seattle. She raised a glass. "To the man who taught our company that success means nothing if you have no one to celebrate it with." Everyone applauded. Ethan smiled at Emma across the room. She raised her glass in return. Later that evening, after the last guests had gone home, Ethan and Emma slipped away to the beach. The same beach where he had once shown her sketches of a future he wasn't sure would ever exist. The waves rolled gently across the shore. The moon painted a silver path across the water. Emma removed her shoes and walked barefoot across the sand. "You know." "What?" "We almost lost this." "We did." "What saved us?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Not luck. Not fate. Not timing." He looked at her. "We stopped waiting for life to become easier and started building the life we actually wanted." Emma smiled. "I like that answer." He slipped his fingers through hers. "So do I." Years passed. The little bookstore expanded into the empty shop next door. Children who had once attended Emma's weekend reading club returned as teenagers to volunteer. Ethan divided his time between designing sustainable community spaces and mentoring young architects. They argued sometimes. They apologized quickly. They still left handwritten notes for each other. Every Christmas, they hung the little wooden heart on their tree. The crack remained visible. A thin line of gold ran through its center. Whenever visitors asked why they never replaced it, Emma would smile and say, "Because broken things don't always need to be hidden. Sometimes they're the strongest after they've been repaired." One rainy afternoon, many years later, Ethan wandered into the bookstore carrying 2 cups of coffee. The familiar bell above the door rang. Emma looked up from shelving a novel. "You still order my coffee before asking what I want." He grinned. "I've had a lot of practice." She laughed, the very same laugh that had made him fall in love all those years ago. Some things, he realized, were never meant to change. He crossed the room and handed her the coffee. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, surrounded by books, memories, and the quiet rhythm of an ordinary afternoon, Ethan understood something that had taken him years to learn. Love was never measured by grand gestures. It was measured by the small, faithful choices made every day. The choice to listen. The choice to forgive. The choice to stay. The choice to begin again. Emma reached for his hand. So, what chapter are we on now?" Ethan smiled as he looked around the bookstore where their story had first begun. "I don't know." He kissed her forehead. "But I know one thing." "What's that?" He squeezed her hand gently. "As long as we're together, our story will never really end."